Hi, I'm Doug Romer. I've been a family physician taking care of patients for over 30 years. In the course of my career, I've seen a lot of changes in medicine. The physician leaders of your medical group asked that I give you a high-level overview of one of these changes that is already affecting my practice and will increasingly affect yours. My agenda for this video is in 3 parts. First, I would like to go back a little bit in time. For most of my career, we physicians were paid based upon the number of services we provided and the amount that could be charged for each service. The more services we did, the greater our revenue. A version of this was true in the hospital business as well. That model wasn't always good for a physician who liked to spend more time teaching about diabetes, ensuring vaccines were given, mammograms were done, or explaining why getting a colonoscopy was so important. The volume world rewarded me when I worked fast, but often enough penalized me when I took a bit more time to do a better job caring for my patients or helping them avoid a hospitalization. You likely have read or heard at conferences about the volume to value transition. The concept of value in our payments is based upon the idea that a physician or medical group who provides higher quality care at a lower cost should be paid more than a physician or group that does not. Increasingly, the people who pay for health care want to link our payments to the quality of the care that we provide and the amount of money that we spend to provide good care. Only recently have I been asked to provide data that would generate a quality score to indicate how well or how poorly I took care of my patients. In addition, my medical group and I are also being asked to take responsibility for how much money is spent to take care of our patients. The good news is that we receive meaningful additional revenue when we do a good job. So far, this transition from volume to value has been slow and confusing. However, with the high cost of healthcare, I understand the goal. Today, I don't think anyone knows what the final form of value payments will look like. For some insurance lines, your medical group will be given a budget to take care of a defined population of patients. The population could be a different size, from 1,000 or 100,000 or more. We will have to submit quality scores and various health metrics to show that we're doing a good job. On the financial side, all the bills for all the patients in the population will be totaled up. If we beat the budget and we have a decent quality score, we could keep some or all of the money that was allocated but unspent. Conversely, if your costs exceed the budget, then your medical group or the risk-bearing entity will be at risk for those losses. The idea is that those of us who provide higher quality at a lower price will be paid better and have more success. Change can be stressful, and changes in payment are significant on the other hand. The U.S. health system that operates today is unbelievably expensive by international standards. In many areas across the country, the difference in quality and cost between physicians or health systems is immense. So, when I first learned about matching a budget to a population, my first thought was to wonder who was going to get all the 35-year-olds in great health. When I started practice, I had lots of young patients, but after 34 years, my patients have aged, and of course, the disease burden is much greater. It is obvious that we need the dollars in our budget to be elastic, to grow or shrink in order to match the size of the population, the age, gender, and disease burden of the population for which we are responsible. If that works right, then taking care of older, sicker patients can be successful both clinically and financially. If not, then we won't have enough money in the budget to do a good job for our patients. Years ago, Medicare developed a system called Hierarchical Condition Categories, or HCC for short, to specifically calibrate the size of a population budget to the specific patients within the population. Because your medical group is moving into payment models that use the HCC system, this video is meant to describe how the program works. Today, what I want to convey to you is, 1, the need to prepare for a budget-based method of reimbursement for at least some of our patients, and maybe for a lot of them. 2, as a correlate to number 1, we physicians will need to more accurately capture the disease burden of our patients. Let me admit, this was a challenge to my practice style. I never spent much time choosing the most exact diagnosis. I have seen the ICD-10 book, but rarely opened it. When my diabetic patients had complications like neuropathy, retinopathy, or nephropathy, I knew about and cared for those problems, but my codes did not indicate the precise detail. It was far more important that I get my E&M code right as compared to modifying diagnoses. Until recently, my diagnosis codes in the record did not really make much of a difference. My skill and my caring did. As we go into the future, that is no longer the case in my practice, and now won't be the case in yours. I have a new job to make sure that I document the disease that my patients have. So, let's take a deeper dive into how this works and its practical implications for PCPs. Also, let me make it clear that this video is not going to be sufficient for you to enact the HCC program. At some point after this introduction, you will receive additional detailed training about how to effectively deploy HCC in your clinical practice. For the purpose of the video, I'm going to use Medicare as my example. As I mentioned, Medicare already uses the HCC system. In the future, HCC can apply to commercial patients, but today's talk will be easier to follow if we stick to Medicare. By Medicare, I mean either Medicare Advantage or Medicare ACO. Again, the principles are the same. By the way, where I practice, more and more patients are switching their Medicare from government or red, white, and blue Medicare to private Medicare by Aetna, Blue Cross, Blue Shield, United Healthcare, or some other carrier. This is called Medicare Advantage. Many provider organizations are participating in these Medicare Advantage programs on a risk basis. This means that they are financially rewarded for better care at a better price. When a person switches from traditional Medicare to a carrier, the risk-bearing entity gets the money CMS allocated for each patient upfront each month. These monies are put into a pool to be spent caring for patients. In some agreements, any monies left at the end of the year is additional compensation for the risk-bearing entity, which could be your medical group. One part of the formula is the age and gender of all members of the population. The insurance companies already know this, and the actuaries have measured the general cost effects of age and gender, so we physicians don't have to worry about that at all. The government sets a budget per person based upon what they calculate as the average patient. The average patient is the average cost for all patients in a region based upon age, gender, and measured disease burden. As we know, few patients are average. Therefore, the HCC program creates a method to fund each patient's care based upon calculations of that specific patient's age, gender, and disease burden by diagnosis. Much of this just makes clinical sense. The diagnoses that you would associate with higher cost patients, cancer, CKD, HIV, diabetes with complications, etc., generate more money for your budget. There are about 70,000 ICD-10 diagnoses. Of those, 9,500 ICD-10 codes have an HCC or RAF value. Therefore, we are challenged to know which diagnoses do have RAF and thus require our special focus. At the start, I want to define two basic terms. One, HCC is the entire system of allocating monies to a budget in order to fund care for a patient population. I will explain more about HCC later, but for now, let's also agree that HCC can refer to any specific diagnosis that is included in the program. The 60,500 ICD-10 diagnoses that are not included are outside of our focus today. Two, risk-adjusted factor, or RAF, is the amount of extra funding that given a diagnosis contributes to the budget to take care of a population. For the rest of this video, I will be referring to HCC and RAF interchangeably. Technically, HCC is a condition and RAF is the specific value of that condition. As I described earlier, the population budget is based upon the sum total of all the attributed patients, so every patient and every HCC counts. First, HCC and RAF are regional, that is, based upon the prevailing spending pattern within your region. The regions are by county. I will cite the Mecklenburg County rates just for simplicity. The HCC system has determined that a total RAF of 1.0 is an average patient. Therefore, a patient with a 0.8 RAF score would be reflected as having fewer health issues and less risk and therefore a smaller budget. Similarly, a patient with a 1.2 RAF score would have a bigger budget and would be expected to require more care. The monthly Medicare budget for a Medicare Advantage patient with a 1.0 RAF score in or around the Charlotte, North Carolina area is $906.31. For each 0.1 change, the allotment of dollars will go up or down by about 10%. There's a bit of noise in the HCC system, but in general, 0.1 up or down changes the base rate by 10% up or down. So, we can follow this math out. If a patient has a RAF of 0.5, and this will happen, then the monthly budget will be $453. A RAF of 0.9 goes up to $815. A RAF of 2.0 is double the average patient, so generates $1,812. Some patients will have RAF scores of 3 or 6 or higher, and you can see what that does to the monthly payment. Remember, these are per month, so on an annual basis, across a 12-month span, these dollar amounts are very, very significant. I will show you some of that in a moment. Let's do some example patients. First, we have a 74-year-old woman. Her age gender RAF, which is like a base RAF, is 0.381. If you multiply $906.07 times 0.381, you get $345 per month, or $4,144 per year. But she has some HCC conditions that generate additional RAF scores. Her type 2 diabetes with neuropathy gets another 0.307 RAF points, which is almost as much as her age gender RAF score. So following the same math, 0.307 times $906 gets another $278 per month, which is $3,339 per year. She also has PVD, which generates 0.305 RAF points, translating to $276 a month and $3,317. So, in total, this patient is just about the average 1.0, just a bit below, at 0.993. You can see how much each of these factors adds to the budget. Now, let's look at a 74-year-old male. Notice that his age RAF budget is slightly higher than the 74-year-old woman. Men tend to be higher maintenance, but Medicare makes that up on us when we die earlier. As you can see, his RAF has a lot of additional codes, some of which generate a whole lot more budget monies for the population. If you miss even one of these, you could be leaving multiple thousands of dollars on the table, which is going to hurt when you want to take good care of your patient population. You're going to have patients with a RAF score of 5, 6, and 7. Look at the amount this adds to the population budget. Let's take this from a population perspective. Let's suppose that your medical group has 100,000 Medicare patients, not an unrealistic number given the size of the organization and the shift to Medicare Advantage and ACO. If we went with our traditional level of diagnosis accuracy, we'd likely have a score of about 0.8. Let's take a look at this chart. At 0.8, the average per patient per month put into the budget would mean that our population would be funded $725. If we were at 1.0 level acuity, then the monthly funding per patient would increase to $906. If we went up to 1.2, the month per patient funding advances to $1,087, and at 1.5 average, the funding would be $1,269. Obviously, we can't assign more acuity than the patient brings to us when they seek care. However, I am sure that many physicians see a lot of patients with multiple chronic diseases, and there are more than a few patients, just like the 74-year-old male we just discussed. So, if we take this to the annual per patient funds, the numbers start to get really impressive. And if we go to the annual budget, the numbers are really big. This demonstrates why accurate diagnosis coding is important. I want to advance now to clarify the HCC process and your role in it. At this point, I need to explain 3 important terms and show you how they work. The terms are conditions, categories, hierarchies. As I mentioned before, there are approximately 70,000 ICD-10 diagnosis codes. Of these, about 9,500 have some HCC value in terms of adding additional money to the population budget. A condition is a medical diagnosis or diagnoses that have a RAF value. These all generate from ICD-10 diagnoses. Let me emphasize this. As a physician, you never have to worry about the HCC condition codes. It is someone else's job to take your ICD-10 codes and convert them to HCC terminology. On the converse side, if you don't identify the correct ICD-10 diagnoses and assess them each year, they can't do much. ICD-10 diagnoses trigger HCC categories and conditions. In some instances, there is a one-to-one relationship between an ICD-10 diagnosis and a RAF value. For example, if your patient has a protein malnutrition, which is ICD-10 E46, then that diagnosis puts her into an HCC category 21, as you can see on the slide. By the way, that diagnosis has a RAF value of 0.554, which is going to be over $500 a month added to the budget. Some categories have many, some literally hundreds of different diagnoses that generate a RAF score. In those categories, there is typically an upper limit as to how many RAF points one can get for the entire category. In instances where there are many eligible ways to get RAF points, but there is an upper limit to how many RAF points you can get per condition, it is called hierarchy. Only the diagnosis codes with a RAF value will get paid. Let's look at type 2 diabetes. By the way, type 1 diabetes is a different category. As you can see, there are a lot of different codes that could generate extra dollars for a diabetic, and these are arranged in three basic categories: uncomplicated, acute complications, and chronic complications. If your type 2 diabetes patient has certain HCC recognized complications, either acute or chronic complications, then that patient could get a higher RAF score for diabetes, in this case a RAF of 0.307. If the patient has type 2 diabetes with no complications, then she will get a RAF score of 0.106. What is important to understand is that for his/her type 2 diabetes, the patient is only going to get either a 0.106 or 0.307 RAF points. There are, for example, over 400 chronic complications listed in the type 2 diabetes category. No matter how many acute and or chronic complications the patient has, they only get 0.307 RAF points. That is why this is called a hierarchy. The one with the most points wins. The net result is you want to claim the highest diagnosis for which the patient is eligible and not worry about adding to the detail when there's no more financial gain to be had. Let's see what this looks like in real-world medicine. I'd like to start with chronic diagnoses because that diagnosis is likely to persist from one year to the next. If I select an acute complication, I may lose that diagnosis in the next year and have to find a new one. There are 400 type 2 chronic complications. They go on for pages. I don't think you will want to go find the exquisitely detailed ones, the one that I highlighted in red. Most of your patients who qualify are going to have the traditional complications: neuropathy, CKD, retinopathy, hyperlipidemia, etc. So I code those. If I don't have any chronic complications from the diabetes, I may have an episode of ketoacidosis, which still gets me 0.307 RAF points as an acute complication. But that's not going to persist into the next year. As I'm sure you will all recognize, primary care physicians take care of a wide variety of chronic diseases, and therefore, we wind up picking these diagnoses and assessing the diseases. This is meaningful extra work. For PCPs, the HCC RAF challenge is greater because the number and variety of diagnoses that we need to be aware of is greater. 9,500 diagnoses are too many to hold in memory. Specialists have a narrower scope of practice in terms of diagnoses and therefore have fewer codes to be aware of and choose from. Further, specialists have been historically more detailed and specific in their diagnosis in order to obtain authorization for either diagnostic studies or various therapies. First, let's review what detailed and specific HCC RAF entails. It is not enough that we simply state we have patients with eligible diagnoses. The first step is that we have to simply get these specific HCC-sensitive chronic diseases on the problem list. If they're not on the problem list, they're most likely not going to be assessed. The second requirement is that each problem has to be assessed at least once a year. Assess means that the medical record clearly has a documented diagnosis, history for the problem, assessment for the problem, and plan for the problem. Not only does each problem need to be assessed each year, it must be assessed in person and face-to-face if we want credit. Happily, Cerner has a tool that will mark diagnoses that have a RAF score and will indicate whether or not each diagnosis has been assessed in this calendar year. The third requirement is that licensed providers will have to include the assessed diagnosis on a claim. Now, let's talk about teamwork for a moment. As I stated earlier, PCPs take care of a lot of chronic illnesses, but specialists need to play a helpful role too. One of the things that your medical group will want to work on is clarity about how the specialists and primary care work together to achieve success. As we mentioned at the start, it is critically important that HCC eligible diagnoses get added to the chronic problem list. Who should do that? If a patient's HCC eligible disease is routinely treated by primary care, then primary care can put it on the list. But there are a number of diseases where specialists should participate. For example, if a patient has cancer, it makes good sense that the oncologist codes the most specific cancer diagnosis. RAF values change by cancer severity and the presence of metastasis is very important. For example, Pancreatic cancer has a much higher RAF than prostate cancer, and the diagnosis of prostate cancer with bone metastasis has higher RAF than a plain diagnosis of prostate cancer. Similarly, if a patient is tested by a cardiologist, a lot of subtle issues come into play. For example, CAD has no RAF value, but almost all peripheral atherosclerotic and plaque findings have ICD-10 diagnoses and RAF value. When these findings are only mentioned in the text of study reports, their presence and value will often be missed. Examples are atherosclerotic findings in the carotids and aorta. Not uncommon, but often not documented, are most ostomies, a large number of skin ulcers, and various wounds. All have RAF value. It becomes important that these are documented as well. Keep in mind that every diagnosis must be assessed once a year by any physician or licensed provider. HCC is in that sense a team sport. If a specialist has documented care for a condition, then the PCP does not need to. This still leaves a large portion of chronic disease to us as primary care physicians. I hope that you have found this introduction helpful. I'm sure this will provoke a lot of questions and thoughts. You will have future communications and support as your medical group rolls out your HCC program.